Thank you for tuning in for our weekly podcast. I hope that the Lord has been good to you. And I want you to know that God always sees those who are oppressed. The oppression that people go through as a result of their political leaders or leaders, they kind of oppress you. They don't want you to make ends meet. They don't want you to grow. They don't want you to prosper. Everything is about themselves and they forget about you. Listen, you better cry to God. You better ask God. You better pray and trust God to come and intervene in that situation. What would you do when you have been in bondage or slavery for a long time? And your time for deliverance is announced, but you are still not free. I'll look at this and say, yes, these people had God through Moses, that time has come for them to be delivered. But still, they were still in bondage. They were still not free. God told Abraham and Isaac and Jacob that he'll remember the covenant, that I'll bless your people. I will bless you, and you'll bless your children and your children's children. That's a promise. But here they are in slavery, enslaved in Egypt, not even their land, in a foreign land. And here they are saying, Lord, where are you? It's like saying, you have forgotten about us. God will never forget about you. God's time will come at the right time, and God will come and intervene in that situation. So your problem is that you have become familiar. That's the problem that some of us have with oppression, marginalization, and you have gotten used to the problem. This is what we say, what we normally say, what can I do about this situation? I can't change anything. It is dangerous to be familiar with oppression. What you need to do is to stand up and say, Lord, I don't need to live this way. I don't need to go through this the rest of my life. You come to a point when you say, enough is enough. And that is basically what made the children of Israel cry to God. And the Bible says God heard their cry. Don't be familiar. Don't settle and say there is nothing I can do about this. God is counting on your tears. That is what you can do. You can pray and ask God, and deep from inside, and you talk to Him and say, Lord, I'm tired of being in this situation, and I don't want to remain here the rest of my life. Don't be familiar. I've interacted with people. They say, there is nothing I can do about this situation. I was born in this kind of scenario and these circumstances. I was born in this family. This is the kind of poverty I was born in, I'm used in. Nobody ever went to school. We have never tried. We have never succeeded. Change your mind. Be ye renewed in your mind. What you need to do is to seek God and pray. Don't ever remain and become comfortable. When you're marginalized, you know that's not your right. When you are oppressed, that is not your right. When you are isolated, that is not your right. When you are underdeveloped, you pay taxes. I'm not political, but that's the truth. You should not be silent. You need to stand and say, no, this is not what I want, and I'm not going to live this way the rest of my life. So the children of Israel said, no, this is not what we need to accept and to allow to continue. You are in bondage, and you know not when you don't act. You don't pray, you don't shed your tears. What do I mean by bondage? Bondage is when you are in a state of being physically restrained and have no freedom. When you are physically restrained, you can't do anything for yourself. You're in bondage. You are physically restrained and have no freedom. Poverty can put you in bondage. Illiteracy can put you in bondage. Drunkenness can put you in bondage. Marginalization, that's bondage. Tribalism and racism, that is bondage. A curse in a family, that is bondage. What you need to do is to identify the bondage, and begin to cry, because that brings oppression, that brings you down. It kills your spirit. It destroys your destiny. It stops your purpose, and the intention and the intents of God will never be fulfilled in your life. You need to come to your senses and say, enough is enough. I'm not created to be in this kind of bondage. And so as you come to the point that you realize that you need to do something, it becomes so painful in your spirit that tears will roll. Let those tears roll down your cheek. God will remember those tears. God will see those tears. Remember, He's looking from heaven. He's dwelling to see the sons of men. And as He sees the sons of men and the women that He has created, He's counting their tears. He's seeing your cry. And that is what will ignite and move the heavens. And from the womb of eternity, God is going to release a supernatural deliverance that man has never experienced. God will release a blessing upon your life that you have never handled before. There is something that God is getting ready to do, but you need to do your part. God is just waiting for you to say, enough is enough. I'm tired of being in bondage, of drunkenness and addiction. All this stuff that keeps you in bondage, that cannot allow you to do what you want to do, restraining you, and you're never free. So bondage will make you cry, and remember the God of heaven. I want to say this again. It doesn't matter who you are. Time comes when you need somebody for a solution, to help. Time comes when you have to cry, and God is waiting for that cry. It is only God who will hear your cry and deliver you. Now, the longer you are in generational bondage, the greater the possibility that you will accept it as a normal or as normal. You have to realize that that is not where you need to be. Don't normalize abnormal things. You have to say no to any abnormal thing that God did not create you to live in, to accept, and His word says, no, that's not for you as His child. So you have to decide and cry and let God do what He wants to do. There is nothing, you sometimes say, there is nothing I can do about it. I do not know why. And why me? These are some of the things that when you interact with people, when they are going through a situation, they have normalized the bondage, they have normalized the oppression of the enemy and the people around them. And they say, there is nothing I can do about it. Listen, God is not stupid. God is waiting for you to do what you can do. No wonder the Bible says, I can do all things through Christ. There are some things that you can do only through Christ. Not by your understanding, not by your ability, by your energy or strength, or by your knowledge. No. You do it because of God. And so may God give you the power and the ability and the boldness and the grace to confront that situation, that oppression. Come and confront it boldly and say, I'm not going to live this way the rest of my life. Think about it. Any addiction, you are in bondage when you are addicted. Alcohol, when you are an alcoholic or you're a drug addict, you are in bondage. You need to come to your senses and say, no, this is not what God expects from me. You need to cry and ask God to help you. Until you get fed up with that bondage, you'll never see freedom. You have to come to a point that you say, enough is enough. Until you're fed up with that bondage, you will never see freedom. You can sing freedom, but you're still in bondage. You can sing freedom, but you're still in bondage. I remember as a young boy, I went to visit my grandmother. This is a very interesting story. The first time my grandmother gave me a small chip, and I carried it and I walked about 4 kilometers. And she tied the wings and tied the legs, and I carried it. She told me, put it under your arms and make sure you take care of it. I was so much excited. And I carried this chicken for 4 kilometers back home. And when I got back home, I untied the legs and the wings. And to my surprise, the chick was still in that position. The legs were still together. I put it down, it could not even walk. The wings were just stuck. I thought my chick was dead. I looked at it and I called my other grandmother and said, "What is wrong with my chicken?" And he said, "No, it's alive." Yes, the eyes were still blinking, but it could not move. Why? It was used to that position because it was tied for a long period of time. It was used to that. And what happened? He told me, just throw some little millet there and you'll see it begin to move. And I pushed that chicken is when it went out and started eating and getting straight and it started walking. Why? Why was the chick still in that position? She got used to that position. So though the chick was free, I untied the legs and all the wings, she felt that I'm still in this position. There comes a time that somebody needs to push you. And that's why I'm bringing this word to you today. That we want you to know that you're free and you have to say, I don't want to remain in the same situation. Being tied up in bondage with no freedom. You need to come back to your senses like the prodigal son and say, I know I don't belong where the pigs are. I'm going back to the Father. It's a decision that you have to make. So God hears every cry of his children. Maybe you're going through stuff and you've grown in a family where your father, your mother were strong believers, men and women of faith. You have a covenant with God. You see, God looked at the cry of the children of Israel, but he remembered the covenant that he made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now listen to me. There are some things I believe when you grew in a family of believers, there's some prayers that maybe your father, your grandfather made that has sustained you. Otherwise, the enemy could have killed you in that bondage. Otherwise, you could have not been able to listen to this podcast today. God has sustained you because of the covenant, because of the prayers and the tears that were shed by your father, your mother, or your grandfather, or whoever it is that was there before you. So don't take it for granted. God remembers covenants. So he remembered the covenant that he made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so when the Lord heard it, what did he do? He drew near to them and he said, I'm sending you a deliverer. And he sent Moses. The only way you can draw God near to you is, first of all, be broken in your heart. Allow God to come in. Be nothing so that God can be something. God revealed himself to Moses now. When he called Moses, listen to chapter 3, verse 6. He said, moreover, he said to Moses, now, I'm God of your father. Then he said, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, and for he was afraid to look upon God. Now, God is calling Moses to go to deliver his people. There is always somebody that God has prepared that will bring good news and good message to you. And that's why this morning, this is good news. God has seen your cry. God has seen your cry. And he's here and he's saying to the enemy, to that bondage, let my son go. Let my daughter go. Let my children go. When God says it, he stands behind it. So let's look at this. Why would God bring in Abraham? Why would God bring in Abraham here? And he reveals himself to Moses. He brings in Abraham because of what? Of the promise and the covenant he made with Abraham. You, listen to me, maybe you're saying, okay, I don't belong to Israel. I am not a Jew. But I have good news for you. You have a blood covenant with God through Jesus Christ. And the covenant releases the blessing promised to Abraham. We are heirs according to the promise. So whatever God promised Abraham belongs to you and I. What you need to do is to get to the way, and the way is Jesus Christ. When you know Jesus Christ, you are talking about being a child of God. You're talking about the promises. You are getting into that covenant. And God is saying, because I spoke and promised Abraham, and you are part of the seed, I am going to do what I promised Abraham. And that's why I told you, I said before, that maybe you are still alive, though you are in bondage. Something that could have killed you, you're still alive because of the prayers of somebody else. And God is still holding on and protecting you. But today is the day that he says, come back to your senses and say, I cannot continue in this state, must come up. Now, let me briefly give you some of the promises that God gave to Abraham so that you connect with your life, you connect with what we are talking about. He says, I will make of you a great nation. Now, listen, these people are in bondage, and the promise of God was that he'll make a great nation out of Abraham, a great person, great people, great community, great family. He said, I'll make you a great nation. Coming out and being great, that means you reach your potential. You do something that you never thought, but God enables you to do it. And he says, I'll bless you, I'll make your name great, you shall be a blessing, and I will bless them that bless you. These are all the covenants that God gave to Abraham. And he says, I'll curse them that curse you. Underline that. I'll curse them that curse you. That means whoever is seeking evil, in meaning wickedness, in planning evil, and uttering curses against you, God says he'll curse them. There are people that bless you, or they curse you, when they think they are cursing you, it's a blessing in disguise, because you cannot curse what God has blessed. You are blessed because you belong to the family of Abraham. You belong because of Jesus Christ. I'm talking to you right now. You belong there. Nobody can curse you. But when God hears a curse upon you, or somebody pronounces a curse against you, God turns it to your blessing. But God does the opposite to the individual. That is the work of God. He says, vengeance is mine. Do not pay vengeance with vengeance. Vengeance belongs to God. So let God do what he says he will do. And I want you to know that God always keeps his promises. And so as these people were in the bondage, imagine with me that God appearing to Moses and telling Moses, I'm the God of Abraham. And Moses knew the promises that God made to Abraham. And so as an individual, I would have asked God, where have you been when we are all this time being in bondage and enslaved? And you're telling me about you're the God of Abraham. We have learned about the promises. And we know, because that has been passed on from one generation to the other. He knew that God's time had come. When God's time comes, he will do what he wants to do. He'll anoint the person. That individual will just give you a word of encouragement. And that's how you'll come out of your bondage. God bless you. I look forward to connect with you again in our next podcast. God bless. Have a wonderful moment of freedom. Bye-bye.